So first, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this evening. An Economic Club member and board member, Dr. Helene Gayle is a physician and the recently named president of Spelman College in Atlanta. Yes. Founded in 1881, Spelman is one of the nation's oldest and most respected all-women HBCUs. Prior to Spelman, many of you know her from her leadership at the Chicago Community Trust, where she was CEO. An expert on global development, humanitarian, and health issues, Helene previously served as CEO of CARE, spent 20 years with the CDC, working primarily on HIV/AIDS with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Helene also serves on various public company and nonprofit boards, including the Coca-Cola Company, Brookings Institution, the One Campaign, and the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. Welcome so much, Helene. Thank you. We are thrilled to have her here tonight. And now, on to our honored speaker. On October 1st, 2018, the board of Pfizer announced that Dr. Albert Bourla, a Greek immigrant, child of Holocaust survivors, and a veterinarian, would become Pfizer's new CEO effective January 1st, 2019. His response to the board after thank you was only in America. Little did he know that less than a year after he started the job, the Chinese authorities would alert the World Health Organization to a mysterious virus causing flu-like symptoms in Wuhan, and his company would begin a race to make the impossible possible. Now, motivated by his early love of animals, Dr. Bourla began his close to 30-year career at Pfizer in the company's animal health division. After holding several executive-level positions, when he became CEO, Dr. Bourla worked to refocus the company on research and development and for a future focus squarely on preparedness. Well, thankfully he did that. Ultimately, it was that reimagining that readied Pfizer to meet the COVID-19 vaccine challenge in 9 months, as opposed to the customary 8 to 10 years it takes to develop a life-saving vaccine. Albert was born and raised in Thessaloniki. I practiced that. I still didn't get it right. Thessaloniki, Greece. His parents, who were Sephardic Jews, were among only 2,000 of 50,000 Jews in Thessaloniki to survive the Holocaust. His mother saved just moments before her planned execution. He earned a doctorate in the biotechnology of reproduction from Aristotle University of Thessaloniki's Veterinarian School in 1985. He left Greece in 2001 for a promotion within Pfizer and has since worked for the company in 9 different cities and has led teams across 5 continents. Since he became CEO in 2019, Pfizer's revenue has more than doubled. Yeah, not too shabby, huh? So Pfizer is prepared to continue to lead in new areas like migraine and ulcerative colitis treatments and breakthroughs with the first RSV vaccine. They also have announced plans to add an incremental $25 billion through business development activities to the company's revenue by 2030. So Albert is often quoted as saying he is Greek by birth, but American by choice. You have made both your native and your adoptive countries very proud, and we're thrilled to have you here tonight at the Economic Club of Chicago. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Albert Bourla.
I'm keenly aware that this podium has been graced by many of our country's best known and most influential and historically significant figures, including 8 US presidents. The friends I grew up with in Greece are likely shaking their heads in disbelief that I'm speaking from the same podium and such luminaries. My mom, on the other hand, I'm sure she found this natural and would have smiled and said, "That's my boy." As for me, I am honored and excited for the opportunity to be with all of you today. Under the talented leadership of your chair, Mary Helene, your president and CEO, David Snyder, and their colleagues, the Economic Club of Chicago remains faithful to Lucius Titer's vision of providing a place for robust dialogue and sharing of experiences and insights as a way to ensure continued social and economic progress. I'm very much looking forward to my conversation with Dr. Helene Gayle in a moment. But first, I wanted to share some thoughts about the link between a healthy citizenry and a healthy economy, and the role of the business community in ensuring both. My favorite Greek philosopher, Aristotle, said that health is a matter of choice. It's not a mystery or chance. In that spirit, I think we have a choice to make. The business community can decide to let someone else worry about public health. We can ignore the indisputable link between public health and prosperity. And we can take a narrow and, I believe, ultimately self-destructive view of what we can and should do to ensure the well-being of all our fellow citizens. Or we can accept and indeed welcome the opportunity and responsibility to have as employers to be forces for good in the workplace and society by leaning in on the critical issue of public health. To use our position as employers to provide a healthy professional environment for our employees and to invest in our communities. I believe we are at an inflection point as a society, and what we decide will have consequences for generations to come. So with all due respect to Aristotle, I don't think there is a choice really. Whether a big business or a small, a pharmaceutical company, a bank, a university, a manufacturer, even a non-profit organization, we are all somehow in the healthcare business. Every one of us who employs people can make a difference. Why do we say that? Because without robust public health, there cannot be the economic opportunity our country needs to maintain its position in the world. People cannot produce if they cannot work. Consider these sobering statistics. About 7.8 million workers missed work in January of 2022 because they had an illness, injury, or medical problem or appointment. And this number is up from 3.7 million a year before, in January 2021. In 2019, an Integrated Benefits Institute analysis found that employees' poor health results in almost 1.5 billion days of illness-related absences annually at a cost of 575 billion in lost productivity. The toll the COVID-19 pandemic has exacted on the global economy has been significant, with the International Monetary Fund estimating that median global GDP dropped by 3.9% from 2019 to 2020, making it the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. So what does all of that mean exactly for us as employers? What is our obligation here? First, let me briefly note that the world has changed a lot in terms of what companies are all about. In the 70s, for example, 80% of the value of Fortune 500 companies was in physical things, such as plants, equipments, inventory. Now, 80% of the value of Fortune 500 companies is in intellectual property, computer code, brand value. Along with this shift has come an increased recognition that people, not things, are the lifeblood of our economy. This has resulted in a fundamental change in the employer-employee relationship and created both a responsibility and an obligation on the part of employers to use their unique position for the public good. And there is nothing more important than health. It is an essential component of a vigorous and vibrant workforce, without which healthy economies are threatened. There are many ways to do this. Health insurance plans, wellness fairs on-site fitness centers, incentives for healthy living, fair policies for maternal and paternal leave, mental health resources, vacations, safe workplaces, flu clinics, among others. And while good health may not be the primary reason for many businesses to exist, no business can afford to ignore it. Some might call it the things I just mentioned table stakes in a world in which there is increasing competition for talent. And I agree. But we need to go beyond workplace programs and invest in what really determines the state of public health. And that is the communities we operate. Did you know that just 20% of a person's health is determined by access to and quality of care? 20%, I repeat, of a person's health is determined by access to and quality of care. 30% is determined by genetics and individual behaviors, while 50% is determined by social and economic factors on a person's physical environment where they live. Or to say it differently, your zip code is a better predictor of your health than your genetic code. This is why the effort to ensure good health must go beyond the walls of a workplace. For companies, it starts there, of course, in the workplace. But it must expand to include partnerships with public health departments to share and deliver accurate information, tools, resources people need, and to take a good, hard look at where there are gaps in healthcare delivery and how we can work together to close them. That requires all of us in the private sector to think differently. I know public and private partnerships are not always easy. Companies and public health departments have different ways of working, different priorities sometimes, and different areas of expertise. But this is a good thing because there is no one size fits all when it comes to public health. We can learn from each other as long as we remember that we are fighting the same enemy. And I have found throughout my life that there is nothing more unifying than a common enemy. That's why grandparents and grandchildren get along so well. Companies are already engaging. Bank of America, for example, recently partnered with the American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association, American Cancer Society, and the University of Michigan School of Public Health to launch an initiative to advance health outcomes to Black, Hispanic, Latino, Asian American, and Native American communities in 11 cities, including Chicago. Partnerships with public health entities unlock opportunities for not only employees, but for communities as a whole. And that ultimately is the key to a healthy economy. The good news is that this all takes place against a backdrop of an exciting scientific renaissance driven by previously unimaginable advancements in biology that we are having right now and technology that will come together to produce solutions of great scale. With a strengthening innovation ecosystem, we expect a dramatic impact on human health, where we can hopefully cure many currently incurable conditions, transform others into manageable chronic diseases, and be better prepared for future pandemics. Already, we are making great progress in many areas, including blood disorders, cancers, depression, anxiety, autoimmune conditions, migraine, respiratory infections, among others. Many, many diseases. And I'm excited about what lies ahead, about a time when these or other diseases are distant memory. Organizations such as the ECC can play a central role in well-being of our country by being a champion for the healthy workforce on which a healthy economy depends. Each of you here tonight, you are here tonight because you care about Chicago, you care about the economy, and you care about your country. You are interested in the issues we face and what the future holds. And I suspect you are here because, like me, each of you is an optimist. You believe we can find solutions to problems, even seemingly intractable ones, and continue to improve our society. I welcome that because my experience has been that even in seemingly dark and challenging moments, and there were none more so than during the height of the pandemic for the world, we need to always believe that we can do the impossible possible. Because we can, because we must, and because our future and the future of our children depends on it. With good health, there is no limit to what we can discover, what we can create, and what we can accomplish as we look to reestablish American exceptionalism across all industries. Thank you very much for this great honor to address you tonight, and stay well.
I just want to say how much all of us in this room are grateful for what you and others did to allow us to be in a room like this tonight. So thank you so much. I also want to acknowledge another person who every day we got up and heard her speak, Dr. Ngozi Ezike. And I don't think that Dr. Allison Arwady is here, but the two of them throughout the pandemic really were our barometer. And so thank you so much for all you did throughout the pandemic and all you did. I have Pfizer, my husband has Moderna, but anyway, that's thank you.
I like you.
So let me just start. I always think origin stories are important, and I know you've talked a lot about your being from Greece, your family's background, and you know, I'm sure there's lots that could be said, but just in general, how do you feel that being from Greece, being from the background that you are from, made a difference in your choices about what you did in life and how that actually helped to fuel your thinking about your career?
I think it's the same like everybody else. The years that your personality is shaped, and those are the younger years of your age, are marking the way that you think and you move in the world. And I was born in a small country. It was a middle class family that I was raised, so we never suffered, but we were not living in a rich environment. I couldn't have everything that a kid would want, but I had everything that a kid would need. And I grew up in a loving environment, so my parents were loving each other, they were loving us, so that made me love people, trust people, rather than distrust people. That played a very key role. I grew up in country that was relatively poor, a glorious history from 3,000 years back, but with a lot of challenges in the modern era. And I learned that it was difficult to find our ways as Greeks among other Europeans that were way more advanced. And to make it even more challenging, also I grew as a minority in Greece. I was a Jewish, and there are no Jews in Greece anymore. They were all exterminated. So I was the only Jewish kid in the school for the first 5 years until my cousin came. So it's, that's how I grew up. And so without feeling discriminating, still you feel that you are a minority, and you feel that when you have things to deal with, they will always remind you that you are a minority. So you should better stay silent. And I never did that. So I tried to be able to embrace my Greek heritage and the fact that I was unique because I was Jewish, and always try to thrive and belong. That's how I grew up. So that made me who I am, and this is how I made decisions when I select people, how in business, how interact with people. I am usually open to, I hug and kiss, and all the things that you should not do in America. Yeah. And, but you know, it works in my case. Somehow, because of the accent, they give me a pass.
So, you know, you trained as a veterinarian, and now you're doing, you know, human health. What was your trajectory from veterinary medicine into pharmaceutical and thinking about human health?
Yes, I grew up in a small division. That's also very always I come from the small to go to the big. The animal health division in Pfizer was a rounding error. It was a very small division, few percentage of sales, and even fewer percentage of profits. So no one was giving us the resources that we needed. And on the contrary, we had to survive the bureaucracy of the big brother because they were very big and humongous and we were small. So in this environment, I grew 17 years. To be successful in an environment like that, I needed to understand very well how bureaucracy works in the company so I can navigate and find easy ways to do things. And also I needed to do things with fewer resources and do things fast and scrappy. And an additional thing that I never felt that we had in pharma, not in Pfizer and everywhere, in animal health we used to be very customer focused because that was the only way to survive. Suddenly, tough times came also in the pharma, and all these bad issues with reputation and the bad issues with science was stagnated for a decade almost, so there was no that many advances to bring new medicines. So the golden age of pharma became a problematic age of pharma, and this is when I joined pharma, actually. And the fact that I was coming from a different environment, I could see things that others didn't. I didn't understand why we need 20 people to do something that I was doing alone in the animal health. And it was, we had such a big pride in animal health that we belong to this group, because this is what was keeping us together, right? The minority needs to feel that if they feel threatened by something bigger, they need to feel that one is close to the other. This is how we were in the animal health. Why the people in pharma, that they are not making animals well, they're making babies well, humans well, grandfathers well. Why they don't take the pride and they don't speak about it. And these were the things that I saw, and I worked in my benefit to make some changes in the pharma that I think worked to the benefit of Pfizer eventually.
So, you know, it's always interesting for people who have been in a company for a long time, what differentiates those who end up moving along the chain and becoming CEO. What are some of the things that you felt were unique about who you are and why you actually advanced throughout the company?
Oh, there are
Everybody doesn't become CEO.
Of course, and there are so many things that the stars needs to be aligned so that you will end up in a position like that, because it's one position and there are hundreds and very competent people that will compete, and luck is one of them as well. I have seen people that were unlucky and then somehow their career took a wrong trajectory and they were not able to bring it back. Really, bad luck, right? So, but it's very difficult to, if you ask me why it was you and not someone else. What I know it is that I didn't care much about the next job, never in my career. I was always caring, doing good job because I was enjoying it. I'm an achiever. I can suffer in the evening if I feel that we didn't progress during the day, our goals. I could be in a bad mood, and I could be just happy like a small kid if I know that we broke ground. That's who I am. And that's what I was doing. I was enjoying doing that. And then people will see you when you do that, and you're getting chances to do other things, and then you repeat that. This is how you make it, I think.
So obviously, COVID has been a huge issue for Pfizer, and put Pfizer in the news in ways that perhaps it hadn't been before. We won't talk only about COVID, but stepping back to that time, I mean, you made some really, really tough decisions. So I'd love to hear you talk about, one, what did it take to accelerate and be able to move things forward in lightning speed? What were some of the choices that you made around how you linked with the public sector and what you did as a private company? And what were some of the biggest lessons that you learned that you will take into the future in terms of how to accelerate research?
There were a lot of decisions that we made, and not all of them were the right ones, but all the critical ones were the right ones. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to finish. And I will start with a very fundamental decision, the decision to be all in, right? I don't think everyone made at that point the decision that there is something there is a role that you can play, and you can be all in with all the resources that you have, period. The second very important decision for us was to choose mRNA. Moderna, for example, they are very good in mRNA. That's what they do. For them, the choice was not, shall we use protein technology, adenovirus technology, conjugate technology, or mRNA technology. The choice was, shall I try to do something for COVID? If the answer was yes, it was only mRNA. In our case, we had all the technologies that we were mastering. And actually, the mRNA was the counterintuitive decision, because it was the technology that never had delivered a product before, ever. Although years that we were trying to develop products for mRNA, we never. And also we had to partner, because the intellectual property was with BioNTech, with a small German company. So it was a tough decision for me to take, that we go with mRNA. My team came and suggested that to me. And they did that because they were working on mRNA for 2-3 years now with BioNTech for a flu vaccine, not for COVID. And they felt strongly that the technology is mature enough and will give more benefits than the other ones. But it was a very difficult decision. Then you said the public collaboration. It was the time that Operation Warp Speed was established, and the government was giving money like there's no tomorrow to everyone. And
you turned down something like $1 billion. $2 billion. Okay, all right. Yeah.
Now, why I did that? Multiple reasons, but there were two that were standing out. One is, when someone gives you money, they never come without strings attached. Never. And by the way, when the money are taxpayers' money, that's the right thing to do. You better have a committee to check how the money are spent. I'm not just giving you and do whatever you want. That's the right thing, right? But that meant that I have to submit my scientists that they were under a tremendous pressure to deliver things that were completely impossible with any benchmarks or statistics, to have them now to agree with the scientists of Operation Warp Speed, how we are going to invest the money or spend them or move ahead. I wanted to liberate them from the internal and external bureaucracy. And for the internal bureaucracy, I liberated them by creating a team that was everyone who was working on a vaccine, from discovery, manufacturing, legal, commercial, you name it, everyone, if they were working for this project, they were reporting to me for that period. We were meeting twice a week, 30 people and me, of all the divisions. That made it very easy for them because they could just tell me what they want and I could give them. So that was the internal bureaucracy. And then we didn't take the money from the external, so they didn't have to sit and do the same thing with external resources. That was one very important reason. The other was, remember the politicization of what was going on, right? And one was accusing the other, and there were presidential elections, and COVID was in the epicenter of the debate, and the vaccines were in the epicenter of the debate. And I didn't want to have Pfizer being part of the politics by taking also taxpayers' money. That I didn't avoid eventually. We became in the forefront of, because we were success. The success was what attacked the attacks, not the fact that we took the money, right? So I think it was the right decision, and I don't think we will be able to finish first if we were taking the money. We would be slowed down.
Yeah, yeah. But you talked, when you were giving your comments, you talked about public-private partnerships. When is that the right thing to do? And can you give examples of public-private partnerships that actually have worked well?
Oh, the fact that we didn't take the money from the government doesn't mean that we didn't work with many governmental agencies hand in hand, and that we wouldn't be able to finish successfully without their support and help. There is no doubt about it. And I will give you a very good example, which is the FDA. Or in Europe, the European Medicines Agency. We did things completely different so that you can develop it in 8-9 months. FDA did also things completely different than their norm. It would be a week that I know the last 3 days, particularly the last one, our scientists will spend up all night preparing the final submission to the FDA of a protocol that they are thinking is the right protocol to do the study. And maybe 7 o'clock in the morning, they will press the button, and then everything was going to FDA, and they would go to bed. And then it was starting for the scientists of FDA a round of 3-4 days that they wouldn't sleep all night because they will review it so that they can reply to us, not in 3 months, but in 1 week. We wouldn't be able to achieve any of that without this level of partnership with them. And I'm grateful to them, and I think sometimes are the unknown heroes right now because they played a significant role in helping us. That's a great example of how the two of us could make something that changed the course of history. And if I have to take it a notch ahead, if we were able, by working together, to do that for COVID, why we don't do it for cancer? So we should take pride that we were able to discover new ways of working and doing so much good for humanity, and we should try to find ways for other devastating diseases. I don't say for everything should be the same urgency as we did, right, or we can stay sleepless nights, right? But also we cannot go back now that we've proved to the world that we can do it in in a few weeks. It's going to go back to 6 months when we are dealing with a protocol for Alzheimer's disease, for example, but it is such a very big problem, or cancer, or all of the other things. So we should use that as an example, as a base to build for a better collaboration in the future.
So, one of the other things that came out of COVID was a real focus on equity and inequity. And we know that, we had a vaccine here in this country. It didn't get to other countries as quickly as possible. It also didn't get to some of our communities here in the United States. You've talked a lot about equity and how you're thinking about how you as a company can really be involved in greater health equity. Could you say something about that and the role that you think that pharmaceutical companies can play in health equity?
Of course. That was the biggest health crisis we had ever experienced in our lives. So it became very clear to all of us at Pfizer that we must, at the end of the crisis, we should find ourselves in the right part of history, not in the wrong. And that included equity. So we discussed what equity means, that everybody should have access to the vaccines. And what does this mean? It came down to two things. You should have, one, vaccines that cost something that everyone can pay, so there is no one that cannot afford to get this vaccine. And the second is you should have enough vaccines for all, because it was not given that you will have, right? So, and we worked not only very hard, but we were extremely successful in doing that. In the year before pandemic, Pfizer was manufacturing 200 million doses of vaccines every year. That was our global manufacturing capacity to the world, all vaccines across all manufacturing sites. The first year of the pandemic, we produced 3 billion doses of COVID-19, right? So that by itself, right, was a main, let's say, enabler of equity, because without the 3 billion, there's very few only will take. And clearly there are not 3 billion people in the high-income countries. There is one in the high-income countries. The second thing was that we implemented a tier price. So there was a price that the vaccine was given during pandemic for the high-income countries, and the price was the cost of a takeaway meal. That was the cost of the vaccine. So we felt that everybody can afford it. By the way, the government was paying. But for the middle-income countries, it was half of that, and we made it very clear to all. And for the low-income countries, it was at cost, manufacturing cost. So we had the two elements. However, we started to experience two unexpected to me situations. The first one was in the first 6 months of the pandemic, when still the production was in the first 6 months we made 1 billion of the 3. In the second 6 months we made the additional 2 billion. Most countries where we were producing vaccines, they wouldn't allow us to export. That included the US as well. The US, until the first, basically all the way to May, June, were not allowed to send anything outside from our manufacturing sites before we cover the US needs. And the US needs were not covered. The same was in Europe. So that was a small, let's say, issue in the first 6 months. But then the US did something really brave, really remarkable. They came to us and we make an agreement that we will provide to the US 1 billion doses of vaccine at cost. So we don't make money, we don't lose money. The cost is paid by the US government. And then the US government donate this vaccine to all the countries of the world. And there was a great move in terms of demonstrating philanthropy and let's say, solidarity with the poorest countries of the world. It was also that the Chinese and Russians were sending at the time vaccines, and the US didn't like that, so they wanted to send. No. Didn't come out as I wanted. It was because I worked with the people that they did. No joke, okay? They truly cared about the human lives that were lost and kept being lost in the place. And they did that very brave. No one else did that. The reality was, though, that those doses were never absorbed by the poor countries. In fact, we had to destroy a lot of them before we give them to the US. So we destroyed it at our own dime because it was impossible to absorb them, in Africa particularly, where was the big problem. Hesitancy. People didn't believe that the vaccines are good things, so they didn't want to do them. Basic infrastructure, lack of a basic infrastructure to create a tent and then have some vaccinators to deliver the vaccine. So to all of us that pretty much what I was saying before, that your zip code dictates who you are. It's not the access to the medicines, so many other things that creates the inequity in the health. So if we are serious about it, we need to work holistically and build from education to infrastructure, in addition to medicines, if we want to address that topic.
Yeah, totally. So on that, you just came back from Davos, and you made an announcement about access to medicines that Pfizer and others are coming together around the Accord agreement. Yeah. Could you say a little bit about that?
Yes, in a nutshell, so we announced that we are giving all our medicines, patent protected we started, and then non-patent, all our medicines, 500 medicines approximately that we manufacture, at cost. And we said cost means to manufacture and logistics to send. We don't load the cost with administrative or legal or R&D or whatever, just this cost. To 1.2 billion people living in the 45 poorest countries of the world. Mainly they are in Africa, but not only. And we will give that at cost. And that's a great move, and I'm very proud that we are doing, and those can address, let's say, significant health issues in that place. But I really know that they will not absorb them. So the thing that I try to do, it's all available to the 45 countries in the world, but we found 5 countries which they seem more progressive, more willing to make a difference. And we started working with them on infrastructure, on logistics, on how you create a warehouse to store medicines. We are sending them the best, or let's say the best, I should not say these things, but we are sending them the most prescribed breast cancer medicine, for example, in the West. The most prescribed breast cancer medicine in Europe or in the US. They do have breast cancer, the women, but to give a breast cancer medicine, first you need to diagnose it. Right. And they don't have the infrastructure to diagnose, or they don't have the education so that women will look for it, or they don't have sometimes the culture that the women will go to a physician to check if her breast has something or not. These are the fundamental things that we need to work on the ground so that a breast cancer medicine can do to an African woman the same thing that is doing a woman in Chicago. So I think this is the big challenge for us. And we are not measuring ourselves with announcing the measures that you can take the medicines and we are washing our hands now, is your problem. We are going to measure ourselves with measuring the health indexes in those countries. If we can move them up, then we were successful. If we don't move them, we failed, all.
So, I was just about to say, and then everybody started clapping, but a cynic would say, you make so much money, pharma, charges these exorbitant prices for, medicine. Of course you can do these nice things. Talk about pricing and pharma and all the things that you get labeled with as being, a bad actor when it comes to pricing.
Yes. In the US, there is a very, very long debate about the drug prices. And when we speak about drug price, I think there are 2 separate issues that they are distinct from each other and have very different dynamics. One, it is the cost of medicines to the healthcare system. So how much an employer will pay for medicines compared to pay for surgeries, for visits, for clinicians, for whatever, for the employees. Or Medicare, how much Medicare will pay for medicines compared to other, let's say, medical interventions. And that's the cost to the healthcare system. Medicines are 12% of that. So by definition, 12% cannot be the big problem, even if it is extremely expensive or less expensive. It cannot be extremely. And the 12% actually, it's smaller than in Europe, where it goes 15%, right? So although the medicines in Europe are cheaper, okay, everything else is way cheaper than in the US. This is what basically I want to say. So eventually it costs you. However, despite the fact that it's 12%, clearly there is a problem, because when you read all the press, all the titles are about the cost of medicines. It's not about the cost of diagnostics. It's not about the cost of surgeries. It's not about it's cost of medicines clearly are top of mind about the people. And it's right, because in the US we have a system that people are paying for their medicines like if they don't have insurance, although they do have one of the best insurances in the world, because their medicines are treated very differently than other medical interventions. They have co-pays. And now, why is this happening? It's a long story. It is very big responsibility of many, including the pharma industry, because we went into a system that we were giving higher list price and higher rebates, which eventually created very big payments. It's technically very challenging, but that's the big problem, and that needs to be addressed. So the medicines should not be paid out of pocket, should pay like everything else. I think I'm optimistic that we are going to a good solution on that. The recent IRA that was voted, although pharma was, and Pfizer including, we were against many provisions of the IRA, there is something that needs to be recognized as something fundamentally great, which is that sets a limit for how a senior should pay out of pocket in Medicare. From year 2025, no senior American will pay more than $167 per month for his medicines. No one, for all the medicines, not for each, for all. For all medicines that he or she needs, that will be a limit of $167. Until now, they may have to pay $10,000 if it was an expensive medicine, cancer, for example. That's great of what will happen. Still, I think there will be Americans that they cannot afford easily $167 because it's the unfortunate reality. But still, I think this is a major step forward to resolving this issue.
So obviously, you're in the business of innovation and constantly thinking about new ways of doing business, new ways of speeding up the processes, as well as just the new ways in which drugs are created. What are some of the things that make you the most optimistic about our future and the future of the pharmaceutical industry?
What I just said also in my prepared remarks, we are entering a decade of scientific renaissance. We have accumulated so much knowledge on the biology front, the genomic, the pathways and the metabolic ways with which diseases are created. And at the same time, we have created advances in technology, tremendous computational power and artificial intelligence. When you put this tremendous wealth of knowledge and information that you have on the biology side, and you power it with technology, AI particularly, we are going to see solutions to medical problems that for years, for decades, we are trying and we cannot even come close. That makes me very optimistic. And I know that it's coming at a period that is needed the most. Because in addition to that, you have demographics, that people are living longer, they are aging. As a result, new diseases or some diseases that had small importance before, now they are having very large importance. And in a period that there will be so much demand for medical innovation, I think will be so much offer of medical innovation. So that makes me very optimistic about the future of life sciences sector.
So give some examples. What are some of the diseases that you think we will be able to make huge advances in?
I think infectious diseases, we will see vaccines in the next few years that will cover the most important of them. I think in cancer, we will see tremendous progress. I know how many studies are running right now, and with the current probabilities of success, if we apply in those studies, and there are big numbers, statistics work, we will see major, major advancements in our fight against cancer. Not everything is great. In neurosciences, still I think we are early. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, still we have the first medicine that was approved, but the clinic, it was not, it worked, but not tremendous difference, right? So that's a problem. But I think slowly, we should be able to see progress there, but I'm not as optimistic as cancer. Genetic diseases that are because you were born with a mistake in your DNA, or you are lacking an enzyme because there's something in your code. We have completely, like hemophilia. Yeah. Hemophilia is a disease that if you're unfortunate and you have it in a let's say, advanced degree, you need to have constant transfusions of factor 8 or 9, and in every single small accident that happens to you, you have swollen, let's say, joints from blood, etc. Now we are having therapies that are coming that with one injection, probably for life, you can treat that. You get one injection, and then your liver will start producing suddenly the factor that is missing, and we have already 5 years patients on that, and the liver keeps producing that enzyme. So there are so much advancements that we're going to see that for some people will be the end of a terrible situation, right? But of course, not for all.
So, I trained in pediatrics and public health, and as a public health person, we are always battling prevention versus treatment. And, we know that throughout the COVID pandemic, there was a lot of misinformation and disinformation about vaccines. People are always more inclined to take treatments than they are to focus on prevention. How do you balance the treatment prevention divide, if you will, and the misinformation that comes with preventive therapies like a vaccine versus treatments?
Yes, you're touching, Helene, on two important but separate topics. I will try to address both of them. I think people need both treatments and prevention, and we need prevention because that's always better than to treat, but some unfortunate people, despite the prevention, will get the disease, so you need to have treatment options so to treat them. All of that is normal science. That's the base of the Western medicine that was developed the last 500 years, right? What we are experiencing, though, and I'm going to the second, it is a societal crisis right now. I'm not speaking about the misinformation that is spread through the social media, because misinformation is wrong information, but can be innocent. You don't know, but you lie. You say what you think is true. That can create some damage, because some people can believe you and you confuse people, but in any case, it's happening, always was happening. We are speaking about organized disinformation. This is centers that on purpose, they spread malicious information, false information that they know is false, because they have an agenda to destabilize society, to make a political move, to make an easy buck, and to basically discredit institutions. And now the enemy, because we went into the COVID and became a very big deal, the enemy is science. Doesn't matter if it is a Pfizer science, or if it is Tony Fauci science, or if it is CDC science, or if it is FDA science. They are all a conspiracy that they are trying all together to harm people. And doesn't matter if it is the same in Europe, and in Austria, and in Switzerland, and in Germany, and in France. The local authorities are saying the same and the same. They are all part of a conspiracy. This is a terrible situation that we have entered. And it is a very dangerous situation. You spoke about my parents and the Holocaust. The Holocaust didn't start in Auschwitz. The Holocaust started with the disinformation of Goebbels that dehumanized Jews, make them to the German population to look like criminals, people that are conspiring against the nation. And then when they were able to circulate all this disinformation and destabilize the conscience of all these people, this is when they moved to Plan B, and then they did all the crimes that they did. This is very dangerous.
Yeah, no, and I think we saw a lot of how disinformation really disenfranchised populations, communities, et cetera. So thank you for your candidness with that. You talked about some of the things that you felt were optimistic, some of the new technologies. Clearly, AI. You mentioned AI. You are, using a lot of new information technology. Could you talk a bit about how some of those trends and some of the things that you were involved in really helped to speed up discovery? What are some of the lessons beyond just pharmaceuticals around how technology and information can be such an enabler today?
We are using it, and we are not the only ones. In general, as I said, those technologies are empowering biological technologies. I will give you just an example. We all know the treatment against COVID, the Paxlovid, the period in a drug discovery that you have the idea this is what you want to do, a molecule that is doing that, until you go to humans, which is when for the first time this molecule will be injected or given in humans, it's a period that lasts usually 4.5 years. And this is a period that basically it's a chemistry, try to formulate the molecule, test it in animals, reformulate it, test it again in animals, reformulate it, and all of that, before you know that you have something that it can be done. And usually you do it with serendipity. You start producing molecules. You have robots that you know what you want to do, and then you start producing molecules, millions. And then you test those molecules to see if one of them is going to work. That's why you call it discovery. You try to discover among, let's say, the many. With Paxlovid, we moved, instead of product discovery, to product design. We gave parameters to computer, and they designed a molecule that supposedly could work. And then we simulated that, and we had, within 4 months, 600 different simulations. And then we selected the one that, We selected 10, and then we progressed, and then one, that we felt they have all the characteristics to be more successful. This is how powerful can be. Instead of 4 years, 4 months. It's tremendous, the difference.
Yeah. So I'm looking at our clock, so maybe I have 2 or 3 more questions. So you just made some fairly bold statements around information, misinformation, and how it hurts or helps us. So the role of the modern CEO, people expect a lot of our CEOs today. How do you decide what you will speak about, what you will, share opinions about? How do you think of your role as a CEO as part of our social fabric beyond just the work that you do for Pfizer?
It's a very big consideration for all of us, and for me, for us at Pfizer, and for every other CEO. And at Pfizer, we created a framework that we debated a little bit and then exists there. So when there is something new, we put it against what we said in the framework, if we're going to speak publicly or not. And in essence, it says that when there is something that is happening in the world, in society, that inhibits our ability to accomplish our purpose and to have defined our purpose, breakthroughs that change patients' lives. So that's why we exist. If someone asks us why you exist, because we want to make breakthroughs that change patients' lives. If we feel that the event is affecting our ability to do that, then we take a public stance. If not, we prefer not to. For example, something that has to do with public health policies could affect. We'll take a public stance, right? But then there are a lot of other areas pretty soon you will find that they are, first of all, there's a lot of demand for you to take a position. And also you see that they are affecting. For example, we took a position when the events happened in Charlottesville, right? You can't really say that what was happening in Charlottesville were affecting the health. Yeah, were affecting the health of the people that were beaten, but not the health issue, right? But me as an organization that I have African Americans working for me, that they were living in fear or in a situation that were feeling that fundamental human rights are suppressed over there, they won't work well. And they are expecting from me to say something. So that's why we took a position over there. I see that going on and on and on. People now, I see that sometimes they're sending me emails if something happens. Something happened in Pakistan and you didn't take a position. Yeah. And I'm working in our manufacturing site in Kalamazoo, and we feel it is great. And I'll tell you in all honesty, there is one topic that we didn't take a position, and I feel it was a big mistake, but when someone from Iran working in our manufacturing sites in Kalamazoo here in Michigan, he sent me a letter, he said, you took position for everything. What about the women in Iran now that they are severely suppressed, and then demonstrations started, and then people were assassinated. And I don't know how and why we didn't take on that one a position. And I still regret the email and the disappointment of this single employee who basically felt that I let him down because I didn't take a position. It's interesting to see how people value what the public figures send, and it's more interesting how a CEO is becoming a public figure. He's not elected to speak to the people. He's elected to run the company. But I think it's the gap of credibility from other areas that rose the credibility of the CEOs. And I'm not sure it's the right thing for democracy, but it is what it is right now.
Yeah, well, and it makes a big difference for your employee base. And I think
huge.
More than ever, our employee bases are expecting us to show our values. So,
and this is exactly how most of that are connected with everything eventually.
Yeah. So clearly, you and Pfizer and other companies were real heroes during the COVID pandemic. Yeah, okay. So what is it like the day after? You're a hero one day, and then you got to go back and just run this company. What is it like, and how do you keep your employees motivated when it's not constantly, we're on the front line of something as incredible as COVID? What is it like the day after?
It's a good question, because it could easily make the next year look a miserable failure, just because you're not every day on the news as as a hero. And look, our people received a lot of love and meant a lot to them. During 21 and 22, big part, they would go to supermarket, and if they were wearing a hat of Pfizer, the groceries on us, sir. So that was something that very few people have experienced in their life, and I have, because I was also the recipient of that love, and it's something that you can't describe how satisfying that could feel. But we are moving on. I think 22 was a fantastic year for Pfizer. The most important number that we reached with our medicines, 1.4 billion people in the world. No one ever has done something like that to that scale. It makes us extremely proud. We were voted the #1 patient-centric organization in the world, #4 in admirable company, actually in the Fortune. Yesterday it was released, we are now #8 from #4, but still.
Well, that's
right?
still, yeah.
Still, all of that is great, but I truly think the best days of Pfizer are ahead of us. Because COVID was, for me, like a rehearsal, a prova generale, how you can mobilize an organization and do the impossible possible against a main disease. We are after cancer and many other things in the years to come.
So my time is up, but I'm going to ask you one last question. You just reported your earnings. You lost how many billions of dollars? Your revenue went.
No, we didn't lose.
You didn't lose. No, you didn't lose. But your revenue dropped by.
Yeah. We announced our expectation for next year,
right.
And there are many billions less than the year 22.
Right. But
still, we'll do well.
But that said, yes, it's all, for some huge numbers, but you continue to think long term. Just say a word about why you are still optimistic in the face of revenue shifts, downshifts, and long-term thinking, and what that does for a company when you are able to think long-term versus just quarter by quarter.
Yeah. What you are referring, it is that we gave a guidance that was significantly less than what the street was expecting in revenues, and at the same time, significantly higher in expenses than the street was expecting. And mostly, the expenses were in R&D. We were at least $2 billion more in spending in R&D than the street was expecting. And clearly, we discussed that a lot before, and with the board, and with consultants. And frankly, I was thinking that it will take a major hit when we announced those news. A major hit, because it was very big, the miss on the expectations for next year in revenues, and at the same time, we were increasing research. We explained to the people why we do what we do. And in fact, we went up instead of taking a major dip. I think we do it because it's the right thing to do. Right now, we have scientific programs that they deserve this investment. They have good probabilities of success. They are based on solid science, and they are addressing significant unmet medical needs. So we will invest the money. The investors know that those money will return money. And I think some, they are shorter term and they don't like. Some are longer term and we like to be with them. So, and we will do the right thing, and I think eventually we'll be rewarded.
Well, I will have to end on that, or else I will never be invited back to be a moderator. But I think you ended on the right note, that at the end of the day, it's always the right thing to do the right thing. So thank you.